In order to attract research funding to our academic medical center and to our medical school, we have to first recruit the best and brightest physicians and scientists. Then we need to support those individuals with state-of-the-art facilities and with funding that allows them to get started, that allows them to do some early experiments and generate data that gives the investigator the ability to determine what is the most promising approach to answering a question or dealing with a particular problem. HW generously provided to me, on behalf of MCW, a grant of $5 million that originally was planned for a 5-year time period. That grant will be extended a bit because of the pandemic. The grant happened to be hit by the pandemic in the early years, and so HW has fortunately given us an extension in order to use the money for the best possible purposes. Once we had our research strategic plan mapped out, we needed to work on it from several different points of view. Clinical trials must be conducted in a very specific way in order to meet the requirements of regulatory bodies. Drugs or devices are being tested. So we were able to provide MCW investigators with an individual that helps them to navigate the FDA requirements and regulatory protections that are in place in order to assure that the results of our clinical trials will suit the need of the Food and Drug Administration in judging the applicability of a new drug or a new device that may be tested.
The project that we had that requires a new investigative new drug application was one that involved using a dietary supplement called propionic acid. And we have data from prior studies where we use a probiotic supplement that shows improvement in how blood vessels function in people with coronary disease may be related to increasing amounts of propionic acid in those individuals. So we wanted to test specifically whether or not propionic acid might improve blood vessel function in humans as isolated in and of itself rather than as part of a different product, to see if very specifically whether this product could actually improve how blood vessels function. So this research is important because the overall health of your blood vessels is something that is measurable and predicts whether or not you may develop heart disease, including strokes or heart attacks, or potentially blood vessel disease that might relate to small vessels like eye disease or blindness from that, or kidney disease. So we did an investigational new drug application because we had some preliminary sort of discussions back and forth with the FDA, which they indicated that based on what we were proposing for the use and what outcomes we were measuring, that we would need an investigational new drug application to be filed and reviewed and approved by the FDA prior to beginning our study. So gaining IND approval poses a number of challenges for an individual investigator. So some of that information that they need isn't things that are readily available to them. You need to go through and obtain a lot of data of people who may have worked with your, in this case, propionic acid, your supplement or your drug of interest, and its effects in humans and animals, so that the FDA can get a better sense of the potential toxicities of what you may be doing and how you're mitigating those. in your studies. So for researchers faced with this type of FDA requirement, the AHW has funded for MCW a position for an individual who has actually significant expertise in working with the FDA on these exact types of studies where you need investigational new drug application to be sent in, helping investigators determine what information they need to be able to have successful applications, to understand what questions to be able to ask the FDA to get the right answers. Because many times you can meet with the FDA or FDA advisors, and really the questions that you need to ask may not be readily apparent to investigators who don't do this often. And Dr. Busse is actually very helpful in helping to guide us on what questions we could and should ask the FDA to be able to hone down what information we need and didn't need in an FDA application for an investigational new drug. So by having Dr. Busse and this type of resource around, it significantly improves our ability to get funding for these types of studies, because when you go in to try to apply for funding for these types of studies, they want to know whether or not you have an IND already. And if you don't, that is something that the reviewers will look at and say, well, this is an interesting study, but they don't even have an IND yet. That's going to take them another 18 months or whatever their thought process may be. So that tends to weigh down scores and lead to poor outcomes with respect to grant funding.